to release political leaders and journalists, to make sure their human rights are respected. That is crucial. If they don't do that, then the dangers of what you're describing become greater.
Okay. Can I move now to Iran? The committee chairman wrote to you in April asking for clarification of the UK position on the so-called red lines that Iran must not cross with regard to weaponisation of nuclear material. In your reply, you didn't actually set out any criteria related to weaponisation, and instead you referred to the stockpile of enriched uranium being suspiciously high. Is it the position of the government that Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium is proof in itself that Iran is seeking to have a nuclear weapon?
Well, Iran has not succeeded in explaining it in any other way. This is the problem with Iran's nuclear program, that it's impossible to explain for purely peaceful purposes. You're right about the importance I've attached to Iran's stockpile of near 20% enriched uranium, which continues to grow since we've had that correspondence. It now stands at something like 182 kilograms, we think. But there are also the issues of installing more advanced centrifuges, of operating the heavy water production plant at Iraq. So Iran's nuclear program cannot be explained in civilian terms for civilian purposes. I think I would put it that way.
But can I take it from that answer then that having, even though it's a matter of great concern, a large stockpile of enriched uranium isn't in itself a red line? It only becomes a red line when they actually weaponise that highly enriched uranium, by which time it's too late.
It's not the government's approach to set red lines on this issue. I don't think that is helpful. Any assessment...
So you don't agree with President Obama then when he talked about red lines?
Well, the United States has not set exact red lines.
Not exact red lines, just red lines.
So our policy is not significantly different from the United States. We have to look at all of these things in the round. It's the multiplication of difficulties with the Iranian nuclear program that demonstrates the difficulty. I think to set a red line in one place and then to say, well, that is the decisive thing, even if improvements are being made in many other areas, I don't think that would help us reach a negotiated outcome, and that is what, of course, we're trying to do.
So talk of red lines is unhelpful?
We don't choose in the United Kingdom to set red lines.
Okay, can I take you to the European Union and US 3+3 negotiation? There's been a recent offer, and the parameters of that offer seem to be slightly different to previous positions that we've taken. Can you clarify in what way the current negotiating position that we are supporting is different to what there was in 2012?
Well, I don't really want to draw a distinction between different packages and offers that have been made at different times. They're all seeking to bring about a successful negotiating process. And in this case, offering some relief from sanctions and commitments not to pursue additional sanctions in return for certain assurances about the 20% enrichment, which is very similar to what has been discussed before, but it had some elements added to it.
But can I put it to you, Foreign Secretary, we've spent, I think it's 7 years in various forms of offers or proposals to the Iranians, and throughout that whole period they've systematically, steadily increased the stockpiles to the level that you just referred to. Isn't that an indication that the strategy we've been pursuing has failed? That in fact we need a new approach, and that maybe the idea of ratcheting up the sanctions indefinitely or marginally changing them isn't going to change the fundamentals here, and that we need a new approach to this issue?
Well, clearly the strategy for alleviating all concerns about the Iranian nuclear program hasn't succeeded yet. I think I would say that rather than say it's failed. We do regularly review our policy on this. It's a legitimate question to ask. Is there a different policy that could succeed? I haven't seen one with a better chance of success from all my evaluation of it than the twin track approach we have of sanctions that have been intensified over time and realistic offers in negotiations on the nuclear program that demand of Iran transparency about its nuclear program and meeting our concerns about some of the things that we've just described. And that's the view not just of me, not just of the British government, but of course the E3+3 negotiations include China and Russia, as well as the United States and European countries. That is our collective view that this is the right approach. We're open to suggestions for resolving the issue if you have any other ones.
Okay, well, it's not my responsibility to do that at the moment. I think I'll turn to my colleagues.
John Barrett.
Speaking of suggestions, President Rouhani's election, you've been understandably cautious, but he is seen as a moderate. You've talked about actions speak louder than words, and perfectly for understandable reasons. But I suggest that there perhaps is an opportunity here to unlock the process, in the sense that I think, although one can accept you cannot admit this, there have been mistakes in this relationship from both sides. And what I would ask you is, does his election present us with an opportunity to introduce a measure of goodwill, an act of goodwill, to try and build on the positive momentum that he may bring to the process? Without being naive, whilst understanding all the difficulties, there may be an opportunity here for the West, as a gesture of goodwill, to unlock what has been a pretty static process so far. Is the Foreign Office giving that any thought?
We are giving that some thought. There could be such opportunities. They need to be reciprocal, of course. There could be such opportunities. And we will respond in good faith to positive action by Iran. We have to sound the cautionary notes, and you're very familiar with these matters. We do have to have an eye on the very complex power structure in Iran. The president might sound to most of the world like somebody who will be responsible for all aspects of policy. Well, that's not the case in Iran, given the role of the supreme leader. And so it remains to be seen exactly how much authority a new president in Iran will have or will develop. We would generally assess the presidency as an institution in Iran to be weaker institutionally in the power structures of Iran than at the time that President Ahmadinejad took office 8 years ago. So that introduces a cautionary note to our consideration of this, but we are ready to improve our relations on a step-by-step basis. No one should doubt our resolve to prevent nuclear proliferation. If Mr. Gates is asking me about red line, that's a broad red line, if you like, including through international sanctions. But we are ready to improve our relations. And for instance, we review Foreign Office travel advice on a continuous basis. We've previously advised against all travel to Iran. As of today, I'm changing that advice. We assess the risks to British nationals have been reduced. Several Iranian officials have made statements regretting the attacks on our embassies, our embassy compounds in 2011. Anti-British rhetoric has been lessened. So on this basis, we will change our travel advice, and from today, we will advise against all but essential travel, rather than all travel to Iran.
A welcome and positive step. But can I obviously agree with what you say about we've got to be careful. Iran is there are multiple centres of authority. Presidential election notwithstanding, I think somebody once said the clue is in the title of supreme leader.
That was me.
That might have been you, actually. But can I suggest that? You've suggested that we should wait for positive action. Might it be worthwhile us actually instigating some positive action in order to try to reinforce the position of President Rouhani in what is a complex political system where often you have competing factions at each other, and therefore to try to reinforce the position of the moderates against the hardliners could be to everybody's advantage.
Well, yeah, we're open to taking positive steps, and there may very well be positive steps we will take, but we will watch carefully for Iran's ability and willingness to reciprocate those steps. And I'm reluctant, for obvious reasons, to characterize any of our policy as one that will strengthen moderates against hardliners. I think hardliners in Iran might notice if that became how I describe British foreign policy, and it might become a counterproductive thing to do, and they will be on their alert for that. But of course, whoever is in power in Iran, and however we categorize moderates, hardliners, or whatever labels we give them, we are open to an improvement in relations, and we will look for their steps as well as being ready to take some ourselves.
Could the key be the embassy itself, in the sense that for understandable reasons we closed it, storming the embassy contravened all diplomatic courtesies and so forth, and we know that, and there was no excuse for it. Having said that, there have been positive noises out of Iran about aggression and so forth. Would one such step be to possibly look at the reopening of the embassy and try to establish a more normal diplomatic relationship? Because of the three stated enemies of Iran, as you are well aware, Foreign Secretary, Israel, the US and the UK, it is only the UK that has any form of diplomatic relations with Iran at the moment, and we need to open those up a little bit more if we're going to make any progress.
Well, it wasn't what we sought to do without embassies, as you appreciate in your question. And so I think it's, given the new president hasn't even taken office yet, and given all the cautionary points I've made earlier, it's too early to come to any decision about this. To send the British diplomatic staff back into Iran would be a major decision, given what happened before. We have no problem in principle doing that, and there are many arguments, of course, in favour of diplomatic exchange and discussion being made easier between our countries. Very good arguments in favour of that. But we would have to be confident that it was safe for our staff to operate that. And what happened before was a flagrant breach of the Vienna Convention. And we have to bear in mind not only that terrible incident in November 2011, but the mistreatment and harassment of our staff even before that, including the arrest, show trial and imprisonment of one locally engaged member of our staff. And so I don't take lightly a decision to send diplomatic staff back into that situation. We'd have to be confident the situation had changed.
Finally, one accepts that robust assurances would have to be given before you took that move. But I come back to the fact that Iran has multiple centres of authority in the political system, constant power struggles. Our challenge is to try to influence those. And whilst not trying to make it obvious that we're reinforcing the position of the moderates against the hardliners, if we're not going to go down the embassy route, can you give us any indication as a committee as to what gesture of goodwill we could perhaps implement in order to try to foster a slight thawing in relations in order to make progress on what has been a long-running standoff?
I think we'll have to develop this, if appropriate, over time. So I don't have other things to set out to the committee. I've indicated an openness to improve relations and a recognition of positive remarks. And I've mentioned I've made one small announcement to the committee that is based on the facts of the case, the travel advice. But I've chosen to make that clear now. And so over time, we may be able to develop a picture of improving relations. But we will be looking for a commensurate response if we're to succeed in doing that. I don't have any other announcements to make today.
Okay, thank you.